Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook page. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Proposition 25. Some have been like on the fence about this proposition for a while. Do we end cash bail? Do we trust our system to do a accurate risk assessment when it comes to, you know, letting someone out or incarcerating them until their actual trial. So I have Cheryl here with me today to do a deep dive into this conversation, into this Proposition 25. Um, Cheryl, you want to introduce yourself and all the work that you do in Contra Costa County? First of all, Cheryl is on like so many boards and commissions, and she got a lot going on. So I want to thank you for taking the time out to actually have this conversation around Proposition 25, which can affect our community in a number of ways. So Cheryl, go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Cheryl Sudduth. I am currently your elected representative on the West County Wastewater District Board of Directors, the current vice president. I'm also a commissioner on the Contra Costa Racial Justice Oversight Body with Michelle. And we are both also on the steering committee for the Contra Costa Racial Justice Coalition. I am with the Contra Costa Immigration Rights Alliance, the American Muslim elected and appointed officials, the National Association of Latino elected officials, the Bay Area Latino elected officials, the political education committee co-chair for Black Women Organized for Political Action here in Richmond, Costa, the steering committee for the Contra Costa Justice Coalition, a lifetime member of NAACP, lifetime member of the WAPA, the Interfaith Alliance, the San Francisco Muslim Community Center Advisory Board, Muslim Women of California Advisory Board, Indigenous Women Workers, Contra Costa County Climate Leaders, and Women in STEM. I just try and cover all the bases. But what I'm really here today is to talk to you about um, this Proposition 25 and why it's important to our community.
Thank you again. When I tell you, like, I don't know how Cheryl does it, like how she keeps up with everything. Like, she's an amazing woman, amazing organizer, amazing activist. Like, kudos for being here with us
Oh,
today.
that reminds me, yes, but most important role I do is I'm a mother, uh,
Yes,
but I'm a
yes,
mother of three. So that's my most important role, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that. So thank you.
yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, so a lot of folks have been, like I said, on the fence about Proposition 25. And I guess the way I kind of look at it is like, it was an example that was given to me. Like, say, for instance, someone was arrested and, was charged with like a rape. And then you have another person who was charged with, stealing diapers. The person who may have been charged with rape may actually, be a part of a wealthy family and they can bail them out of jail. But the person who, stole Pampers just to, because they didn't have the means to buy them, they also don't have the means to bail themselves out. So the way I look at it is like, we definitely should vote yes on Prop 25, because with that, what it does is actually get rid of the cash bill and actually put a risk assessment in place. So yeah, I wanted to do a deep dive in this on this subject, and get your viewpoint of it.
So let's just go back 1 second though. Let's go back a couple of steps though. So Prop 25. First of all, let me just say this because I always find it really, really interesting how right around election season, how black and brown, indigenous, low income, people with disabilities, other marginalized people, we get so much interest right around election season. And this one's no different. And
Mm-hmm.
because they need us. They need our votes. They need us as these props to get people elected. And they need these special interests. We become these really special interest groups. But
Mhm.
then you have all of these really partisan groups kind of pushing their own perspectives of what we should be accepted and what should be acceptable for our communities. They don't ask us what we want, what we need, what we expect, what we deserve. They just tell us. And it's usually people who don't share our own perspectives. But sometimes we have people who share our own hue, our own culture, our own surnames, sometimes are even our own challenges, who sell us out to the highest bidder and then proclaim that they have our best interest in mind, or that we should have this particular view of what's representative of the whole community, unbeknownst to our community. And Prop 25 is no different. So let's break it down. There's an estimated 47,000 Californians who are held in jail at any one time who have not been sentenced, but only accused of a crime. And there's a disproportionate amount of those individuals who are Black and Latino. For most of these offenses, a defendant has a right to a pretrial release. And depending on the alleged crime, the judge will set a bail amount. And that bail amount is based on, several factors. And most of those factors include, the alleged crime, the person's criminal history, and this bail schedule. This bail schedule, in and of itself, as we know, has built in parameters that work against people with hue to their skin. The bail schedule is this preset grid with these dollar amounts across it and these specific crimes down it. And it tells you how much you should charge for that person to get out of jail. And then they do this really unscientific guess on whether or not this person is likely to come back to court while their case is still pending. Traditionally, people exercise their right to pretrial release a couple of different ways. You either put up the money that's quoted to you from this bail schedule, or most people, since they don't have a lot, tens of thousands of dollars lying around, they use a bail bondsman, a bail bond company.
Mhm.
A criminal defendant has those couple of options. So you post the cash, or
Right.
you post your cash, or you post property with the bail bond
Right.
company, right? And it's usually about 10% or so of whatever
10%.
that bail amount is. And the bail bonds company goes and represents to the court that I will make sure that this individual will show up to court during this pretrial, during this trial period. And then the court
Mhm.
says, okay, well, you're responsible for this person and you're going to sign for it. And then the amount that you put down is non-refundable.
Right.
So imagine that.
Even when charges are
$500,000,
dropped.
even when the charges are dropped. It's
Yes.
$500,000 bond, $50,000. $1 million, 100,000. To a person who has wealth, money wealth, I call it, because everything isn't about money. That may be something you can do. But even if the charges are reduced from maybe a felony charge to a misdemeanor charge and no jail time is required, or the case is dismissed, that money is not coming back to you. So this is how bail bonding companies made their money, because vast majority of the people show up to court, they do what they're supposed to do, and a lot of times these bail companies walk off with your 10%. And even in the small percentage of defendants who don't show up to court, the bonding company, knowing that they're going to be on the hook, they are going to come looking for you. They're going to track you down. And you end up going back to jail, and then they go after whoever it is who signed for you. They're going to go after the full amount because you just signed your house or your credit card or something saying that I'm going to pay the full amount if this person disappears for that 10%. We know that the system is already deeply inequitable. Everybody knows this. This is not a big surprise. But a high bail amount, while it might not be an obstacle for someone who's affluent, it doesn't matter. Even a low bail amount causes an issue for a person with little or no money with a relatively minor offense. So, as you mentioned in your example, a
Mhm.
person who is affluent, who is charged with a very serious crime like a rape, if they're affluent and they have a high bail amount, they can stand a chance of getting out of jail when a person who has little or no money with a relatively minor offense can have a low bail and still be held in jail. And we know that criminal proceedings are like notoriously slow. So this
Exactly.
person with bail who cannot pay, and remember, this is pre-trial,
Right.
pre-trial, which means that you've only been accused of something, not charged, only accused of something. You are stuck in jail for months and sometimes years. You stand
Mhm.
a chance of losing your job, losing your home, and oftentimes losing your family. Many are divorces, many times children are taken from you because you are in jail for something you are accused of doing. Many cases, as you said, have been dropped, dismissed rather,
Right.
or charges have been reduced because you have been accused but not found guilty, or and then you have people who are so desperate to get out that they will plead to
Mhm.
something they may not have done. Those unfavorable plea bargains are not unusual, but when you do those unfavorable plea bargains, it comes with a criminal record that you may not have had you had an opportunity to be able to afford to go to work, still live in your home while you defend yourself. Why is it an issue? It's no rocket science.
Right.
People who don't have money, who can't afford to pay bail, end up sitting in jail longer. Whereas those of us who may have access to cash or resources will get released. Period. Cash bail is not only criminalizing poverty, but it also still reflects this very systemic racism that not only plagues the criminal justice system, but it plagues our society. And this criminal legal process is just another arm of our societal um, racial system, systemic racial system. So why, how do we get here? We can go back to 2018 and SB 10.
Mhm.
SB 10, a lot of us fought long and hard for SB 10. And it started out, it was great. It was great when it started out. You know, those of us who fought for it, we were like gung ho up and down Highway 80 to Sacramento. We were spending days,
Mhm.
nights in Sacramento. We were fighting,
Yeah.
fighting. It was heralded, you know, it was groundbreaking. California was headed for one of the most groundbreaking laws. All kind of social justice groups were fighting for it. As I said, I was sitting at ACLU. We were all fighting for it. Then at the 11th hour, cut a deal. The legislators cut a deal with some lawmakers, and they pretty much gutted the bill.
Mhm.
And they gutted it to give these judges more power with this algorithm that was going to allow um, them to decide who gets out of pretrial detention. And at that point, a lot of social justice organizations and grassroots organizations said, wait,
Right.
we can't be a part of this. And they pulled out. Why? Because it was very controversial. It was more controversial because, you know, there was a lot of evidence that the tool that they were using was going to cause a lot more. um, a lot more racial bias,
Mhm.
and that there was going to cause even more inequity in the pretrial process. So we had to take a look at the tool itself to figure out, okay,
Exactly.
so anytime you have humans, anytime you have human beings involved
Mhm.
in determining who, who who gets what, you're gonna have some racial bias.
It's gonna be
When
somebody.
you combine that with, a computer system that human beings put together,
Yeah.
each step of the way, this, each step of the way, you're gonna have some bias built into the system.
Yes.
So we had to take a look at that. And so since 2018, when SB 10 was passed, but as soon as SB 10 was passed, the bail bonds industry filed this motion. They started filing motions in court.
Mhm.
And that stayed, 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 that halted any changes to the law, which required that judges start using their discretion to figure out who could get out of jail. And that we know that the bail bonds industry has a vested interest
Absolutely.
in not letting people, out on their own recognizance,
Mhm.
or out
Mhm.
without charging people money. So this how we got to where we are, and then I can tell you more about the tool in a few minutes. But this how we got to where we are.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, for those who are kind of on the fence, you've already mentioned it. The system bias, folks who are putting this assessment together. So some folks have actually said, we got a better chance with cash bill than we do with this assessment. Like what kind of assessment are they gonna do? Like what kind of questions are they gonna ask? Who actually determines who's at risk to the community? So we got some folks that are like, it's a catch-22. It's you know people who live in poverty cannot afford to pay cash bills, and then those who believe like the assessment will be biased are like, you know, how do we win? Like it's a catch-22. So, what are your thoughts on it?
So here's the issue with this. Let me give you an example. How many people, I'm going to tell the same people this story. How many of them can go home right now if a family member called them right now and said, I need you to come bail me out and I need $50,000 right now? I want them to take an honest assessment right now and say, I need you to come get me for $50,000, $100,000 right now.
I mean, none that I know of, for sure.
And I say that to say, like I told you before, my mother taught me this. Don't judge somebody else by what's in your purse,
Mhm.
right? You don't look in your purse to make legislation for somebody else's
Mhm.
purse.
Mhm.
No, I know my house over $1 million. I know I can take the house, and I tell them, if one of my children, take the damn house. I'm getting my children out tonight. I can
Right.
go look at my bank account right now, and I'll take the 10 G's out right now.
Right.
But that's me, and that's a
Mhm.
different kind of privilege. And I live with that privilege, knowing that's me. And I know that's my husband, and I will do whatever it takes to get my children out. I will give them cash and get my child out. I don't have to go to a bail bonds person.
Mhm.
I will cash in some stock today and have my child home.
Right.
I will tell those people that. So I'm not fighting for this for Cheryl. I'm fighting for this knowing good and well that most people can't do that.
Mhm.
That's number one. Number two is this so-called risk assessment. There's a couple things there that we've done and we've been working on with the governor and with the chief justice of the state of California. When you have the chief justice, and I need people to understand and hear me good when I say this, the chief justice is over all of the court, the judges in the state of California. The
Mhm.
Chief Justice is behind SB 10. The Chief Justice is voting yes on Prop 25. So when you have the head judge of the state of California telling you
Mhm.
that they don't think you should have to pay money to be out of jail on pretrial, you should be listening, because the chief judge finds this inherently unfair that someone's freedom is hinged on whether or not they can afford to pay. And the chief justice, the governor of the state of California, have agreed to work with us to make sure that we are looking at any bias that is in these risk assessments. And we've been doing this for the last year, year and a half. The legislators, the sponsors of the bill that preceded this proposition, and the SB 10 have agreed to work with us to make sure that we're looking at these tools. We call them tools, and we've put into place that each year and then biannually we're looking at these tools to make sure that it is doing the job that it's supposed to do. And if there are any biases, that we're tweaking those algorithms to take out those biases. Now, yes, there are people involved. And whenever there's people involved, like I said before, there's gonna be some bias.
Mhm.
But they are to be held responsible for this in public. What happened before was that judges could go behind the scenes and talk to prosecutors and say, okay, talk to me about this. Talk to me about this person and tell me why I should or should not grant OR on
Mhm.
recognizance, or tell me why I should, um, or what kind of bail you want for this person. And they'll come up with all kind of reasons. Oh, they're homeless, so they don't have anywhere to go, so they're high risk, or
Hmm.
they only have a low wage job, so they're high risk, or they don't have anybody to vouch for them, so they're high risk. Meanwhile, you have the guy, the Stanford rapist,
Mhm.
but he came from a good family, you see,
Right.
so they can vouch for him, even though he's raping women who were
Mhm.
unconscious. You didn't rape the woman unconscious, but we can let him out on bail. But the
Right.
guy who's stealing to feed his family, we got to put him in jail because, well, nobody can vouch for him.
Right.
So they go behind the door, the closed doors, and they advocate behind the door, behind closed doors. The way this new law is set up is that judges have to uh, publicly announce how they came up with this, how they have to publicly announce how they made the decision
Mhm.
to either grant or grants bail or not. So they are now held accountable where they were not before. And for those of you who don't know, judges are voted or are elected.
Mhm.
Even when they are appointed for a short term, they are then elected. Some of you, those of you who vote anyway, may miss
Should
those,
vote.
and
Everybody
everybody
should
should be
vote.
voting.
Yes.
But you miss that section of your ballot where you should be voting on the judges, and you should be looking up their voting record on some of these.
Absolutely.
And that is how you can tell how these judges, how many have they released. So public safety and flight risk of a person who's been arrested, the so-called, what that means, this is what we've all been fighting for, right? How do you define public safety? How do you redefine so-called public safety? How do
Mhm.
you redefine flight risk? Is this flight risk, is this person likely to return to court while their trial, or while the proceedings, because it's not necessarily a trial, while the proceedings are going on?
Mhm.
And there's other ways that we are trying to determine. As you know, you've been I mean, we've been doing this in the racial justice oversight body. There's
Mhm.
other ways that you can ensure that an individual will show up to court other than keeping them behind bars. Even if you determine that they're not necessarily a low risk, even if you determine that they may be a medium risk, there's other ways even that can allow them to go back and forth to work, even if it's different kind of monitoring other than keeping people behind bars. And that is what some of the courts are doing. Some of the courts are doing, uh, electronic monitoring for people who they may suspect, that they're iffy about, rather than just flat out OR, which is much better than having people lose their jobs. Some are required to only go back and forth to work.
Mm-hmm.
Some are requiring, in some states, they actually do the same thing they do to people who have, the little tool that goes on your steering wheel for people who drink.
Mm-hmm.
So now they have to check in, so they know when you're driving, and but you check in. You can check in with your with like a probation officer or something of the like. But you check in as soon as you come home. You just call.
Yeah.
They can electronically monitor you that way, so you're not necessarily wearing a bracelet or anything like that, but they can tell it's a GPS monitor, like a wristwatch. But they can
Mm-hmm.
tell when you're home or when you're away from the place where you're supposed to be. So there's other ways you can make sure that people are going to be where they say they're going to be, but it still allows them to go to work. It still allows them to, be with their family, and it still allows the state to be ensured that you will show up for your trial.
Yeah.
The
And
the
go
public
ahead.
needs to be. Go ahead.
No, I was
Mhm.
just gonna say I think it's important because, like you said, some of these some charges may be dismissed. So if folks are like waiting and waiting and waiting, and then they're missing out on work, they're missing out on family. This is a great alternative to that is to do this type of monitoring. I've even heard, and I think you probably were at the meeting where the public defenders were saying like they may have like some type of text systems to like remind folks of their court date or whatnot to ensure that folks are showing up for court. And I think that you know I just can't imagine just sitting in a cell waiting for a court date, only to find out later that you know charges are dismissed or whatnot. So I think that's very important for folks to
Exactly.
look at.
It is. But let me tell you one of the most important reasons why you have to vote yes on this one. If anybody, there's two things that I really want to make sure we understand about this particular proposition. If you think it's easier to work with the bail bonds industry and convince them that this is the right thing to do, and that you are going to have an easier time working with bail bondsmen who profit off of people at the worst moments of their life,
Right.
or with jailers who make their living off of putting people behind bars, rather than working with this replacement system that we know is flawed. However, we know that is so much more of a less of a battle to work to fix an imperfect solution by working to um, continue to work on the inequities of this system while people are out of jail,
Mm-hmm.
than it is to try and to convince someone who profits from bail. And lastly, if Proposition 25 does not pass, this inequity of the criminal legal system, meaning um, cash bail, can be enshrined in California law,
Mm-hmm.
which means that we will be prevented from future legislative action to curtail this commercial bail industry. That is something that is in the small print that most people have not read. Most people do not know that this may be our last opportunity to get rid of cash bail in California, because we may be enjoined from fighting cash bail after this because of the way that the bail bonds industry has fought and asked the courts to rule against it. So the way this referendum has been written, they may get their way not only now but in the future. That's why we're fighting so hard for it. It is so much easier to fix the flaws than it is to try and fix someone who profits off of you. And that is
Absolutely.
why I'm fighting so hard on it. And like I said,
Absolutely.
this is not, I don't have a dog in this fight right now. This is not mine. You know, and that's why I find it so hard for people who are, who are directly impacted. I find it very difficult. Um, Especially when some of the organizations that I work with that say they're on the fence. You can't be on the fence. What do you mean you're on the fence?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on the fence for.
Yeah.
I, I I was talking earlier. I was like, my husband comes home. He says, "Dear, what would you like for dinner?" I don't know.
I'm on the
Uh,
fence.
you decide what we want for dinner. Let me see. So, should people be allowed to stay in jail if they've only been accused of a crime, or should they be allowed to go home and be with their families while they wait the outcome of their trial? I don't know. I'm on the fence. What the hell? You on the fence? You got me on the fence. I mean, some things you be on the fence. Should I wear my blue sweater today or my pink sweater today? I don't know. Should people's liberties be taken away because they don't have money to get out of jail? I don't know. I'm on the fence. Come on, League of Women Voters, ACLU,
Yes.
NAACP. Come on, you can be on the some things you can be on the fence. This is not an on the fence matter. This is a matter of not just. I know everybody wants to make this about race, but I don't think it's about race. Honestly, I think that the majority of people affected by it are black and brown people. That
Right.
that's a no given. But the vast majority of people affected by the criminal legal system are black, brown, and low income people anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's a given. So I do believe that that's the vast majority of people affected by SB 10, Prop 25, period. But I don't think that that's what this particular issue is about. For me, the reason I'm fighting this has less to do with race than it does have to do with basic civil and human rights. This is a human rights issue to me. And this is a
Absolutely.
basic civil rights issue to me. The Constitution says that you cannot be unreasonably held and you cannot accuse somebody of a crime they have not been convicted of and you hold them for 1, 2 years and you haven't even convicted them of it. They've just been accused
Right.
of it. And the
Exactly.
only reason you're holding them is because they don't have money to get out, and you're trying to trick them into taking an unreasonable plea.
A deal. Mm-hmm.
And you're making money every day that they're in that jail. So people who don't see this as a human rights issue, as a civil rights issue, you have blinders on because that's who's making money. The only people making money off of this deal are these jailers
Mm-hmm.
and these bail bonds people, and then some of our prosecutors because we're keeping them in business. So that's why I'm working on it. I'm working on it from a basic civil rights issue and a basic human rights issue. This is human rights violations. You don't keep people in jail like this. It's not fair. It's not right. It's just not right. So that's why. And then the fact that it affects black and brown and low income and indigenous people more, that's just more incentive for me to keep fighting because they're people of hue. And anytime you affect people of hue, you get me stirred up.
Off top.
Yeah, just like a
Absolutely.
candle, like a candle, right? Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I think that the rights and the dignity of people accused of crimes don't go away just because you're accused of something. I can just imagine that you get accused of something that you did not do, and now you have to You have to give up everything, um, because you're only accused, and the Constitution
Yeah.
protects you for that. The Constitution protects you for that, and I think that all of us have to. It's like that old rule: they accuse you on page one, and then you don't hear the retraction until page 18. I mean,
Right.
we have to we have to do better. We have to do better. And I think that the only way we
Absolutely.
can do better is we have to fight. And for those of you um, who were, I hope you aren't anymore, but those of you who were confused or wavering, I want you to think about it this way: if you're gonna fight something, don't fight. Please don't fight Prop 25. If you're gonna fight something, fight for the meaning of public safety. Fight for what it means to have to be a risk, a public risk. Help us fight those definitions. Help us go to Sacramento. Help us redefine what it means to be public risk. Help us redefine what public safety, so called public safety, looks like. Because a lot of people who are so called risk or unsafe are really just people who are they may have had a bad day, may have had a mental uh, um, issue that day. So let's work on those definitions, because that is where that risk assessment comes in. That risk assessment also comes in because it looks at things like your criminal history. But for many black, brown, low income people, that criminal history may start when you're 12, 13, 14 years old with your interaction with the criminal legal system, right? And so that should not affect if you're 30 now and they're looking at your history from when you were 12, 13 years old and you stole that backpack at the
Mm-hmm.
store. And so, let's look at things like that, and let's make sure that we are defining what it's like to feel safe in public. Because if we're defining public safety, I'm looking at lead poisoning. I don't feel safe. And I'm not talking about lead poisoning in the water. I'm talking about that lead coming from the man in blue. That
Mm-hmm.
that led in making a lot of us black, brown, and indigenous and low income people. A lot of us don't feel safe from the
Exactly.
public safety officers. So let's work towards that and stop picking apart the things that are really helping us. This is a good step towards the community. We are so used, you know what it is, Miss Shayla, and let's be honest. We're so used to not being trustworthy that we find fault in everything.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna find fault in everything,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I think that we work against ourselves. We work against ourselves, and I'm so against seeing people get put into cages that if I see an opportunity for us to snatch ourselves out of a cage, I'm like, hell yeah, take it.
Take it.
Take, take it.
Exactly.
The hell you institutionalizing yourself for? You sitting here and you're like, nah, I'll take my chances behind the bars with bail. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Are you serious? They telling you to get out. It's like post-traumatic slave syndrome. You better get the hell out. They said you could leave the plantation. You better go run.
Right. Feet to the
Run.
ground. Smoke behind you. That's behind you. Yeah, definitely.
Take the
Yeah.
shackles off and run. That don't pay no bail. I can think of a whole lot of other things to do with that 10 grand, 25 grand, then give it to somebody who has not your interest in mind. What you mean you're
Yeah.
gonna take your chances with the bail system?
Yeah. You make some as you put your glasses down. You make some very good points, Cheryl, and I really do thank you for having this deep dive conversation. I think it's very important. As we wrap up, I do want to give you an opportunity. I kind of think you kind of did it already, but any last words to address the voters um, as we wrap up here?
Absolutely. I just want to make sure that One, vote. This is my number one word, vote. It is not enough that we sit on the sidelines and we complain or we pontificate or we 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 cannot continue to allow ourselves to be used in these conversations without being at the forefront and in these conversations from the very beginning. A lot of us has spent a lot of time making sure that we not only help write the legislation, but we help perfect the legislation. And then the next step towards that is once we help this yes on Prop 25, it doesn't stop there. There's some accountability that has to happen. If you're really, really concerned about this, I would invite you to make sure that you are part of the grassroots effort that we have started to make sure that you are watching to make sure that everything that we say happens, that you are getting involved, that you're watching to make sure the tools are being used. If you see some bias in the systems, we have court watchers that go in to make sure that if you see something that doesn't quite sit with you, you say something about it. Go into court sometimes. Watch. If you live anywhere near a court, go in and watch some of these. If you get a chance to go to Sacramento, watch how your legislature works in action. Write. Write your legislators. Go visit them in their home offices near you. Talk to them about your concerns. These are the things that help us fix our so-called democracy. But the one thing that you can do is help define what public safety looks like. It's not enough to touch just your neighbors or your friends. You've got to touch the people who really make it happen. And the last thing that I will say to you is if you really, really, really are sick and tired of being sick and tired, there's a public seat with your name on it waiting for you. Nothing stops you from running for office. I'm a scientist, but I'm an elected official too. And I decided that I needed to make a change. We need more Black, Brown, Latino, Indigenous people in office pushing the agenda for our communities. We know all skin folk and kinfolk, and not all brown or down. So if you think you're going to do something that is not for the community, then stand down. But if you know to your core that you have the community's best interest at heart and that you know that you can represent it with your entire being, then stand up and do something. But complaining is not the way. We have never, ever, ever got anything done by sitting on the sidelines and complaining. We are beautiful, brilliant, resilient people. Our hue, the sun did not kiss us like this for us to sit back and let things roll by us. We did not come this far in our history, in our generations, to let things just go by us without us being a part of making change. And it won't come from you wishing and complaining it away. It has to come with you doing the work. Those hands were given to you, those ears, those legs, that back was built with the strength of your ancestors. Make them proud. Do what you got to do. But you get out there and do the work. And that work sometimes requires to close the mouth and get the hands working. We can't make that change. We're just complaining about it. Let's go. Get Prop 25 passed, and then let's go out there and make sure that it does the work that we want it to do. Less people behind bars, more people on the street to do the work that we need. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you so much again, Cheryl, for taking time out to do this deep dive conversation around Proposition 25. How can folks get a hold of you? I think I saw it scrolling down at the bottom.
Yes,
They can reach out to you anytime. There you go. Her
anytime.
email address is there.
Anytime. And then
um,
I did publish an article on on Prop 25 on my Medium account. I'll be publishing some more on some of the other propositions, but that one was one that I really wanted. And then also, of course, vote yes on Prop 17, so that it's formerly incarcerated and those on parole can have an opportunity to vote in this
Yes,
election as well. That one I think is
absolutely.
also very important.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much, Cheryl. We're gonna let you get back to all your
Mm.
duties, your mommy duties, your
Work.
all your duties, right? And I will be in contact with you soon. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.